The sound of running water echoed off the tiled walls of the diner's restroom, but it couldn't drown out the soft, muffled sobs of a woman trying to hold herself together. Her trembling hands gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles pale under the harsh fluorescent light. Her reflection stared back at her, tired eyes, streaked with mascara and regret. Her name was Alyssa, and behind those weary eyes lived 1,000 silent stories. She had learned how to smile when her heart was breaking, how to laugh when the world felt heavy, and how to say, "I'm fine," even when every part of her wanted to scream. To the customers, she was the sweet waitress with a gentle voice and a patient smile. But behind the counter, her manager saw something else, someone too quiet to fight back, too desperate to quit. If you believe kindness, courage, and second chances still matter in this world, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes. Because stories like this remind us what truly defines strength, the quiet kind that refuses to break. That morning had started like any other. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the low hum of chatter and the familiar clatter of dishes. Outside, the small town was just waking up. Inside the diner, people laughed over pancakes and steaming mugs, unaware of the tension simmering beneath the comforting rhythm of the morning rush. Alyssa moved with quiet grace, balancing trays and refilling cups, her smile steady even when her chest felt tight. But in the corner of the room stood Mark Ellison, the manager. A man with slicked back hair, a shiny watch, and an ego big enough to fill the room. He barked orders like a drill sergeant, snapping at anyone who dared to be less than perfect. He was the kind of man who mistook control for respect, and fear for loyalty. Alyssa had learned to keep her head down. She had learned that silence often kept her safe. But that day, fate had other plans. It happened in an instant, a simple accident. She was carrying a pot of coffee, her hands steady despite the morning rush, when a customer called her name. She turned slightly, just enough for a few drops of hot liquid to splash onto Mark's crisp white shirt. Time froze. The diner went silent. Mark's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing with barely restrained rage. The smell of burnt coffee hung heavy in the air. Alyssa's apology stumbled from her lips, soft and shaky. But it wasn't enough. Not for a man like him. "Follow me," he hissed, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Every worker looked up, eyes wide with worry, but no one dared to speak. Alyssa's pulse quickened as she followed him down the narrow hallway toward the staff bathroom. Her footsteps felt heavier with each step. The door shut behind them with a hollow thud, sealing her inside with his anger. Mark's fury exploded like a storm. His words were cruel, jagged things meant to wound. He called her careless, stupid, worthless. Each insult hit harder than the last. Alyssa tried to apologize, but he cut her off, stepping closer, towering over her. Then his hand shot out, gripping her collar, pushing her back against the cold, tiled wall. Her breath caught. Fear filled her chest like ice. Her trembling hands tried to push him away, but his grip only tightened. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. Somewhere inside her, a voice whispered, "Don't let him break you." That voice belonged to Evan, her husband. He was a Navy SEAL, deployed overseas for the last 3 years. Every letter he sent reminded her to stay strong, to hold on to hope, to believe that courage wasn't about being fearless but about standing firm even when you're terrified. She had been working double shifts. To pay rent, to keep their small apartment alive until he came home. What she didn't know was that Evan already had. An hour earlier, Evan had walked into the diner quietly, wearing a simple hoodie and jeans. He hadn't called ahead because he wanted to surprise her, to see the moment her eyes lit up, the way she used to laugh when she didn't know he was watching. He ordered a coffee, sat near the counter, and waited. But as he sat there, his excitement turned to confusion. He saw Mark's hand grip Alyssa's arm roughly. He saw the fear flash across her face before she disappeared down the hallway. Something inside him shifted. The soldier in him, the husband in him, both knew that look all too well. Inside the restroom, Mark's voice rose again, cruel and unrelenting. "You think people come here for you? You're lucky I even let you work here." His grip tightened, his face inches from hers. Alyssa gasped, fighting for breath. Her heart pounded. The sound of running water filled the silence between his words, echoing like a clock ticking down. And then, the door creaked open. The sound was small, but it felt thunderous. Mark froze mid-sentence, his head snapping toward the doorway. Evan stood there, silent, calm, and terrifyingly still. His eyes, sharp as steel, locked onto the scene in front of him, his wife pinned against a wall, her collar clutched in another man's hand. The air shifted. The rage that had been brewing in Evan's chest went cold, the kind of cold that comes before a storm. He stepped inside slowly, each movement deliberate, his presence filling the room. Mark stumbled back, his face pale. He stammered something about misunderstanding, about accidents, but his voice broke under the weight of Evan's stare. Evan said nothing for a moment. He just looked at him, really looked, and the silence said more than any threat could. Then he reached out and gently took Alyssa's hand, pulling her behind him. "Are you all right?" he whispered. His voice was soft, steady, and in that moment, the trembling stopped. Alyssa nodded through her tears. Then Evan turned back to Mark, his tone calm but heavy with warning. "You'll never speak to her again. You'll never touch her again. Do you understand me?" For the first time, Mark didn't have power. His arrogance drained away, replaced by fear, real, raw fear. The kind that comes when you realize your cruelty has finally met its reckoning. The security guard, who had seen the whole thing, didn't move. He just stood there, silent, watching justice unfold. When Alyssa and Evan stepped out of that bathroom, the entire diner was still. Every customer had heard the shouting. Every worker had seen Mark's cruelty before, but no one had ever dared to stand up to him. Until now. Alyssa walked beside her husband, her head held higher than it had been in years. The tears had dried, replaced by something new, strength. For the first time in so long, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel powerless. She felt seen. That night, sitting together in their tiny living room, Evan finally smiled. It was the same warm, boyish smile she had missed for years. Alyssa leaned against him, whispering, "I thought I'd lost myself here." Evan kissed her forehead gently. "You never did," he said softly. "You just needed someone to remind you how strong you already are." The next morning, the town buzzed with whispers. The story spread fast, how the arrogant manager had been confronted, how the owner of the diner had fired him that very day. The owner came to Alyssa personally, apologizing for not seeing sooner what she had endured. He offered her a higher position, not out of pity, but respect. She had not just survived what happened. She had risen above it. Months later, Alyssa opened her own small cafe. She called it Second Chance Diner. It wasn't just a name, it was a promise. A promise that no one would ever feel belittled or broken within its walls. She hired people who needed a fresh start, single mothers, veterans, students. The cafe became more than a place to eat. It became a place to heal. People came for the food but stayed for the feeling. Alyssa made sure that every customer left with a smile, because she knew what it felt like to have hers taken away. And every morning, as the smell of coffee filled her new cafe, she'd glance at the photo by the counter, a picture of her and Evan, smiling, free. It reminded her that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to say, "This ends today." If this story touched your heart, if you believe kindness is strength and standing up for others still matters, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes. Your support helps us bring more true, emotional stories that remind us of the goodness still alive in people. Before you go, comment below, what would you have done if you were in Alyssa's place? Because sometimes, courage doesn't roar. Sometimes, it's the soft voice that whispers, "Enough." And that day, in that small diner bathroom, kindness and courage finally walked back in together.